Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness. It's time to have new conversations about mental health. Join Mara James as she guides us along this journey. And now, let's talk wellness.
Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness. I am your host, Mara James, and I want to say thank you for joining us today. These conversations are all about taking a deeper dive into understanding how we can help support children and their families to have better mental health and wellness. Let's Talk Wellness is brought to you by the Extraordinary Lives Foundation, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to improve children's mental health and emotional wellness. You can find out more information about ELF and more episodes at elfempowers.org/podcasts, and you can find the link in the show information below. Now, let's talk wellness with today's guest, Carrie Cesario. Carrie is a childbirth educator, a doula, a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and a certified conscious parenting coach. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, Mara. Thank you so much for having me.
It's so wonderful. We've been working together a lot, and I know that you work with a lot of my husband's OBGYN patients, so it's such an honor to have you here today.
It's a privilege and an honor as well. Thank you.
So tell me, so you mentioned when we spoke in the past that you have a passion to work with women and helping them to have an empowered and relaxed pregnancy, which also you said has a great direct positive impact on the future baby. Can you share with us about this?
Yes. So I am extremely passionate about serving women and helping them start off motherhood on the best foot possible. And that means helping them have a relaxed and stress-free pregnancy so that they can actually enjoy it. And of course, as we know, the way our mind works, it affects how our body functions as well. And so a woman who is in a state of happiness and joy is releasing happy chemicals into her body, and that creates a more it lessens stress, and it creates a more healthy body and therefore a healthy pregnancy. And of course, everything that's going on in mom's body is also going on. It affects the baby in utero as well. So if mom's releasing lots of happy hormones like oxytocin and endorphins, those get into the baby's body. And the opposite is also true. So if mom's under a lot of stress and she's releasing stress chemicals such as catecholamines and adrenaline and cortisol, then those also get into the baby and then send signals to the baby. And of course, the happy hormones also facilitate a better bonding experience postpartum.
Oh, how interesting. I know I had a client who had so much anxiety about flying and referred her to one of my healers who's a hypnotherapist. And they figured out that when she was in her mom's belly, her mom had a panic attack on the airplane. And then she actually, it's now these became her emotions, and she couldn't take, go on the flight without a prescription. And, after releasing it, now she's able to fly. So there's such a direct connection.
It really, really is. When a woman is having certain experiences in pregnancy, and also childbirth, but particularly in pregnancy, that definitely affects the baby in terms of, whatever's going on in mom's mind, and then therefore her body is going to send signals to the baby as well. And so with your client having the experience of the flying fear, that directly translated. And so whatever mom brought to the table to the pregnancy, and then after the birth is going to directly affect the baby as well, because of the stress hormones that are being released into the baby as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I noticed, I look as an OBGYN's wife, I look at my husband's patients and then how the children are, and not blaming any of us. My kids were all in trouble before they were born, growing up as a neurotic New York Jewish mother myself. Right? Definitely passed on some genes to them. But it's interesting when I look at a child that has ADHD and like looking at the parents or what happened either during childbirth or during delivery, or, just, because they have some extra energy sometimes that they took on from one of their parents.
Yeah, definitely. And the stress that a woman goes through culturally, perhaps familially during pregnancy, but then there's also generational stuff that is going on as well. So, you know, if every woman in her family line had a negative birth experience, and that's just being passed on as well until somebody decides that they're going to break that cycle and they choose differently. And that's what I ultimately did for myself as well, why I ultimately became these childbirth hypnosis instructors, because I did Hypnobabies with my pregnancy and for my, it really inspired me to help other women change the trajectory,
Wow.
patterns that pass down.
So Hypnobabies, does that mean that you don't have an epidural at your delivery, or has nothing to do with that?
Yes, so that is a great question. Yeah, most of the women who choose to take a Hypnobabies class are choosing medicated birth, and they are using medical grade hypnosis techniques called hypnoanesthesia to control the sensations in their body. So actually require any kind of pain medication because they're not actually experiencing pain. They're using the power of their own mind, the sensations in their body, and it's quite remarkable and powerful. And I, as I said, used it for my pregnancy and childbirth with my first, and it really inspired me to support other women along the way. I found myself advocating for this experience throughout my pregnancy and really found my voice for serving women, and that's really what I've been doing ever since. So it's coming up on 15 years now.
Wow. So it really shows the power of the subconscious mind, right? If somebody doesn't believe that hypnotherapy or Hypnobabies can help them, then I'm assuming that it won't work or they wouldn't go through the process. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Hypnobabies is a full-scale childbirth education course, and so we're really teaching our couples, because it's the mom and dad, or the mom and mom, depending on the situation of the couple. And they take the class together, and we're giving them the full childbirth education, but also teaching them these hypnosis techniques and why it works. The mind controls the body completely, as we were just talking about. What we're experiencing in our mind emotionally, such as stress or joy, dictates the kind of hormones or chemicals that are being released into our body. And so when we learn that the mind controls the body completely, then we learn how to control pretty much everything in terms of sensations. And a lot of people do use hypnosis as well for other types of controlling sensations in their body, such as chronic pain. So you can go to see a hypnotherapist for getting over fear of flying, like your client, or controlling other types of sensations, including using hypnoanesthesia for dental work without any medical anesthesia.
I was just going to say, and I haven't heard of that hypno anesthesia saying before, but I was just going to say I had another client whose husband was horrified to go to the dentist. So the hypnotherapist was able to have him like move the pain outside of his mouth versus in. And he told the dentist to do his root canal, whatever it was, without any medication. And the dentist, he was insane. And he did it, and it worked out. It was just amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you move beyond the fear, right, and then you learn to take back control, you actually have control over your own body. And this is the same for women in childbirth. And then when that experience takes place, when a woman has complete autonomy and control over her childbirth experience, she has an evolution as she takes that rite of passage of maiden into mother. She then lays this beautiful, wonderful, solid foundation for her motherhood journey. And again, the signals that were sent to the baby through this whole process is that we're a team and we're doing this joyfully, blissfully. And it really does make the postpartum experience that much more, of course. It really does connect and intuition in a deeply profound way when she's able to transcend the fear of the mind. Because as we've talked about already, fear is directly linked to stress and all of the stress chemicals and hormones that are released in the body, like, again, cortisol, adrenaline, and other catecholamines. So when a woman is able to have a blissful pregnancy, blissful birth, and she's more likely to have a really blissful postpartum experience.
Amazing. I never thought about it that the mother and the baby are a team.
Yes.
It's such an
Yeah.
interesting, beautiful way to look at it. Like, it's really profound.
Yes, they really are a team when they're giving birth. Babies are, in many ways helping themselves out as well. It's one of the things that I, as a hypno-doula, I always try and help my clients connect to the baby in utero. Really talk to your baby, see your baby. You're a team. You're doing this together. I always see my clients sort of really relax, and there's like a wave of joy that flows through them when they really start to see it that way.
That is so beautiful. Yeah, my 3 deliveries, 22, 25, and 28 years ago were very different. There was no team. It was me, myself, and I, and thank God for my epidural that helped me through it. And it was just very, what's the opposite of mindful? It was a very, I was spiritually asleep. It was just very interesting, right? As opposed to, I wish not at 50, I'm not having another baby, but it'd be cool, like, to experience it after experiencing that way versus experiencing it this way and really doing it as that team.
Yeah, it definitely was a different era, that when you were in your childbearing years. But at the same time, anyone who ends up with a childbirth experience that isn't the way that I'm describing it, can certainly move into the blissful parenting or blissful mothering, with a certain amount of mindfulness, as we were just saying, mindfulness or awareness of, as which is the other part of the work that I do, is the conscious parenting, and really focusing on you and your child being a team on the outside of the womb.
I love that team. Oh, it's just so beautiful. So what happens to the mother that might be listening to this and feeling a little guilty because she sees in hindsight that her mental health, emotional wellness during her pregnancy and delivery was less, a little more stressful, anxious, fearful, and now her child's having some emotional challenges themselves. What would you say? Obviously, we don't want them to feel guilty. What would you recommend?
No, we all consciousness that we're at the time we're making those decisions, right? And so that's the beauty of conscious parenting. It's about being in the present moment, and recognizing when we have emotions that are not happy, bliss, joy, and taking ownership of them so that we're not then continuing to project those onto our child. But if she's feeling guilty that she didn't get an unmedicated hypnobirth, be aware of that and just internally look at it and ask yourself, what can I do now in this moment to make my relationship with my child as elevated as possible? Again, you're still a team, even though if you didn't necessarily get that teamwork element in the childbirth experience, you're still a team as you're raising that child. And that's the beauty of just parenting. Again, it just brings you back into the moment, and aligns more with guiding the from this moment on. And if anything like guilt or shame or regret comes up, really just look at that, because those are blockages that ultimately are releasing stress chemicals and keep you blocked from bliss and joy.
Wow. What about the husband's or the partner's emotional well-being when the woman is pregnant? Does that have an effect on the unborn fetus?
Well, it certainly affects mom, right? And then, of course, as that affects mom, it affects the child. But yes, it certainly is a factor into the family dynamic, and depending on the nature of how conscious the relationship is how you transcend those types of stresses in the relationship coming from dad, for example, or the other birth partner. But again, it's all about being very aware that whatever's being released into mom's body is also being released into the baby's body, and sending the baby signals about how to survive in the environment on the outside of the womb. And that's really affecting gene expression in the baby in utero as they're developing. So again, if there's, for example, a famine happening, or there's the certain types of environmental experiences that the mom is experiencing, it'll send a signal from her body to the babies to turn on a gene to conserve, right? To conserve and hold on to fat so that they survive the outside world. And so when we look at it from that perspective, the most important thing that we can do, if with certain things like stress, if we can control the amount of stress that's coming into mom, either through her own internal fears that she brought to the pregnancy experience, or through her relationships with her or other family or friends that are around her on a regular basis. If we can be very aware, conscious, create an environment that is most conducive for the healthiest pregnancy and most experience possible, because at the end of the day, that's really how a woman is going to connect instinctively and intuitively to her baby and facilitate that bonding experience, because those first 3 are crucial in the brain development of the baby. First 5 are really, those first 3 years are the most important for the baby development, and it really does require a mom who's very attuned instinctually and intuitively. And that's how I see this whole process: conscious pregnancy, conscious birth, conscious parenting, conscious mothering, right? And when we talk conscious, we're talking about being very in the moment, this moment, and connecting and bonding with the baby in a way that will allow the woman or the mother to understand that child's unique cues while being verbal.
Love that. And you spoke about Gabor Mate when the baby's in utero. Can you share a little bit about that, please?
Yes. So Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, developed with his partner the compassionate inquiry method therapeutic approach to healing. And it basically takes a psychological and spiritual approach to healing, deep inner child healing, which is very similar to transpersonal hypnotherapy, which is what I have my clinical hypnotherapy certification in. And so when we look at it as the whole person, right, body, mind, and spirit, body, mind, or consciousness, or whatever word you would like to use to describe it, we're looking at the deep inner child experience and how the inner child forms an ego or a personality to survive the outside world. So it starts in utero, as we were just talking about, how mom's experience of her outer world affects then the baby. And then ultimately how the child then navigates the outer world. The ego, which is the personality of the inner child, are the coping and defense mechanisms of the mind. And again, it directly relates to our fight-flight responses to the outer world, and our nervous system. And so when we're born into an environment such as, say, Gabor Mate was born into World War II Hungary, and he's Jewish, and so there's the whole element of everything going on in Eastern Europe at that time. And then he was separated from his mother for 10 months when he was an infant. And so there was a lot of experiences that he had while in utero and then immediately after birth that affected him the rest of his life, and the way his personality formed, and then ultimately the choices we make on the outside based on those those personality developments of the ego. So when we do compassionate inquiry, we're always looking at the places that the person is suffering, or blocked or limited, and we go deep into that inner child. We sort of excavate or dig into the deeper recesses of why, and then we can see. And it's all about, as it's described, compassionately holding space for that person to feel those feelings that they had to compartmentalize for one reason or another, and release it. And it's an amazing passage, if you will, into liberation of your authentic self. And that's ultimately what this work is doing, as well as conscious parenting, as well as transpersonal hypnotherapy. So these three things go, and the birth work as well, go hand in hand.
I love that. And so, and as we've discussed in the past, the most important thing when a woman's pregnant is discussing the healthy baby. And we say, well, what about a healthy mama? So we're going to take a brief break. And when we come back, let's talk about helping a woman to trust her instincts and intuition, and how sometimes they can't because if they're in a PTSD mode. So hold on, and we'll be right back.
We hope that you're enjoying today's Let's Talk Wellness podcast. And if you have a topic that you would like us to explore, we would love to hear from you. Simply email us at info@elfempowers.org. That's info@elfempowers.org. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Wellness. I am your host, Mara James, and today we're speaking with Carrie Cesario. Carrie is a childbirth educator, doula, certified clinical hypnotherapist, and certified conscious parenting coach. Welcome back, Carrie.
Thank you for having me.
So before you were speaking about well, so many amazing things, right? One is with the woman's intuition. And before we get into how you talked about there are some things that limit a mom's intuition. I know when I had my children, especially my middle one, who was very challenging and gifted, but at 6 years old, he was diagnosed with Asperger's and ADHD. And I didn't even know what my gut instinct and intuition were. Those terms meant nothing to me back then, but I did know. I knew what I knew when I knew it. And when my son was getting irritable, I knew we need to go back to the psychiatrist to increase his meds. And my husband was like, no, he's fine. And I ignored him because I saw my son suffering and it was affecting us. And I went back and the doctor increased it and everything was great. But what do you recommend, like when that mother's intuition and instinct might be different than their spouse, than their family members, than their friends?
That is such a great question. And this is why starting this process of stepping into a woman stepping into her power, even before pregnancy, because I do work with women of all age ranges, I am starting to think of that I'm kind of like from menarche to menopause, because I'm working with women in this whole range, primarily the childbearing years. However, the quicker that a woman starts to step into her instinct and intuition, her feminine power, the sooner then she will then be able to inspire her family, and they will begin that trust in her inner wisdom. And was your inner wisdom, your inner feminine prowess or power, to be able to attune to those subtler energies of your child that most people don't pick up on, because your child is uniquely they're still inside of you. You're the one that grew them, right? And their DNA stays inside of you for years and years. And I think that does in a lot of ways facilitate that instinctual aspect. And so when a woman is trying to explain to her spouse, her partner, or family, friends, whoever, that what she's experiencing, what she knows, or her inner wisdom is correct, it is best for the woman to have open dialogue with these people in her life prior to the having children, I suppose. But in your case, it took a while to insist that you take the child back to the doctor and get things right. Sometimes we do have to be more assertive in that way if we haven't already set those boundaries, or we hadn't already stepped into our power and created those trust relationships with our partner, that our inner wisdom is correct.
I love that. And when we were just talking about team before, it's like, let's include the spouse, or if there is, another parent, whoever it is, including them as part of the team and letting them trust. It's funny because, again, as my husband's, he's the new director of midwifery services at Hoag Hospital, and he oversees midwives. And very few doctors have faith in midwives. And that's a very, that's a powerful place to be. And it's like the science versus, I don't know what the opposite is, or, that I don't know what, right? But it's interesting to have the man trusting the woman and trusting their instincts. And again, and this is where it comes. For some reason, my husband does have this trust and faith in the midwives to empower them and to show the other doctors, wow. And then, of course, like, let's look at the outcome. Like, their patients are having successful natural deliveries. They don't have to have a C-section and all this. So what is the opposite, without using the God word, like, of medicine and intuition? What is that? How do you call that?
The opposite of medicine. This is again, when we move fear from the equation, and we allow the woman to be her inner wisdom to guide her along that pregnancy and birthing journey, then naturally, when you get to the point where your child is suffering, you naturally are able to listen to the mother when she senses something is off. And this is one of the reasons that I feel such a profound connection to the childbirth experience, and having the partner witness and bear witness to the woman taking this transition and trusting, because there's nothing that particularly in this case, if they're in a heterosexual relationship, there's nothing that a man can do in the childbirth experience except hold the space, be protector and provider. I always like to say the masculine's role is the outer to the inner, and the feminine role is the inner to the outer, and together you make a whole team, right? And so when a woman is sensing that there's something off about her child, or there's something that needs addressing that's beyond her immediate control, then you listen to her because you witnessed her stepping into her full feminine power in the pregnancy and birth experience. So then you fully trust her when she's then mothering this child from an intuitive place. But it really does start with allowing a woman to have a fear-free pregnancy, a fully confident, joyful pregnancy, utilizing that experience to tune in to her instincts and intuition. I, as a hypnotherapist coach, I developed a life and birth trauma program that incorporates all of these modalities, so that a woman who had an adverse birth experience, or comes into the pregnancy experience with an adverse life experience that could block her from taking that rite of passage to be fully attuned to her instincts and intuition. One of the first things that I do is root her in that moment of stillness in pregnancy, where she's deeply connected to her power, because there's nothing our minds can do to grow a baby. We just are in absolute trust. There's no fear there. There's just absolute trust. All women experience, if not a full pregnancy transformation, then there are definitely moments. I always like to root them in the moment of where they're just sitting there and their babies are moving around in their stomachs, and all time stands still. There's nothing that's requiring their attention on the outside, and they're just deeply attuned to the baby that's moving inside of them. Like I said, time and space stand still. And I root them in there, and I get them back into connecting to that feeling of power, instinct, and intuition. And I say, that is your true self. That is your authentic feminine power right there. And I want you to hold on to that awareness as we start to navigate some of the fears and traumas that are holding you back from being there more of the time than not.
Right.
Right.
And what happens when your patients or clients, however you refer to them, they start spotting or they're on bed rest and they start going to pure fear that they're going to deliver early, that they're going to miscarry, that something is going to happen? What do you do then?
Yeah, complications in pregnancy are rare, right? And so when things do happen, it's important that we maintain a sense of calm and a powerful surrender, just kind of like when a woman is giving birth unmedicated, it's a powerful surrender to what is happening. And of course, when you're powerfully surrendered, you're present or conscious, you're aware, you're uniquely attuned to your intuition, and you just, when right words are needed, right words come. When right action is needed, right action comes. And of course, if you need medical attention because a complication is happening, then you powerfully surrender and you go to where you need to go or see who you need to see to address the situation. And of course, if you're experiencing fear, you witness that and you watch that. You don't let it consume you, because that takes you away from your power. Power and fear can't exist at the same time. So it's really important that you learn to become the witness by staying conscious, being aware in the present.
Wow, sounds so easy to do and so challenging, right?
Right. And it is challenging at first. And this is part of the work that I do when I'm working long-term with a woman. Is part of the reason that it's challenging is because we have a lot of unresolved emotions that we carry into from childhood. And so the reason we have those is because we don't always have a passionate, conscious adult sitting understand the complexity of our emotions. Again, we all do the best job that we are at the level of consciousness that we are at the time we're raising our children. And so it's all about re-raising ourselves. And that's what conscious parenting really is about re-raising yourself. And at first, it's important that somebody be guiding you and helping you hold space for those emotions in a way that you needed when you were 2 or 3 years old, or 4 or 5 or 10 or 12. Essentially, holding space for yourself to let those emotions go that are blocking you from your true power. I do this as a doula. Every doula knows that her main job is to just hold the space and be a guide for the woman, because again, you can't give birth for her. Your partner can't give birth for you. So you hire a doula, or you have your partner being protector, provider. And as a doula and a mother myself, I'm the experienced woman in the room that is sort of reassuring you, guiding you into this space of. And that's essentially what I do with my clients as well. I like to say that I'm a birth doula and a life doula. So getting over those fears really does require, at first, for most people, a compassionate practitioner holding the space for you while you learn to look at those emotions. A really great child psychologist, Dr. Dan Siegel, wrote The Whole-Brained Child. And he talks a lot about the neuroscience of the developing brain of the child. And he often says that in order to help a child to help them understand or make sense of their emotions, the parent needs to connect. Obviously, we want to connect with when they're having big feelings. So obviously, as parents, we want to first connect before we correct. And we connect and attune to our child emotionally. We let them know that we're there with an open heart, holding space for their whole range of emotions, no matter what they're feeling at any given time. And so after we connect or we attune to our child, and we're holding the space for our child and all of their big feelings, then we want to teach them how to be emotionally intelligent. And by that, Dr. Dan Siegel says that we should help them name it to tame it, and then feel it to heal it. So we name the emotion, and then we sit and we feel it. Because when we feel it as a child in the safety of our parent or caregiver, then we don't feel like we have to hold on to it. And then it doesn't become a lifelong blockage.
Wow.
Right? Only to come up later in life.
Yeah, because the next question I was going to say, you were talking about like healing trauma that comes up during a woman's pregnancy, because the trauma lives in the subconscious and builds blockages that keeps us in fight or flight in the future.
Exactly. The mind and body are connected, and the mind controls the body completely. So the mind, whatever we went through, whatever traumatic experiences we went through, dictates to our nervous system how to navigate the outer world. And we're much more easily triggered, or a lot of people like to say we have a very short fuse for certain things. Based on the experiences that have its roots in our childhood. Obviously, we can experience traumatic events later in life as well that can inform our psyche. But most of us, it's lifelong patterns. The conditioning we received as a child in our family and in culture, and the patterns, the repetitive patterns that we then experienced that solidified our reactions to stimuli. And so when a woman is receiving a lot of input that is triggering to her nervous system, that's what releases the stress chemicals. And then of course that gets into the baby. And then this is how we see generational trauma passed down.
Wow, so interesting. Carrie, what's the best way for our friends out there watching and listening to us to get in touch with you?
You can find me on my website, www.bluelotushypno.com. You can also find me on social media, blue.lotus.hypno.com or blue.lotus.hypno.
Okay, and we'll put that in the links in the show information. So Carrie, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today, and to you and all of our friends out there, you are amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Wellness. This podcast has been brought to you by the Extraordinary Lives Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. If you would like to listen to more conversations like this, we invite you to subscribe to our mailing list at www.elfempowers.org to be notified when our episodes are published. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you our next conversation on Let's Talk Wellness.